show how to put replacement mixer bars in a mixer. This is actually a new mixer, so I wouldn't, I didn't have to cut out the old bars. But when you cut the old bars out of your mixer, unless some of them, the really old ones are bolted in, obviously you just remove the bolts there and then weld these new bars on. If they have to be cut, this is a mild steel in the frame and it's a tube steel, so try not to grind into that or cut into that if you're using a cutting torch. Rather cut the weld or even into the stainless steel on the old mixer bars, just so you maintain as much strength in the frame as possible. So once you get the bars taken out, go ahead and sand it or grind it a little bit just to clean it up where your cut was. So then you'd be at this point. It would be cleaned up. Your old bars would be out. First thing you want to do, the tubs are all, they have a little bit of movement in them. So what I want to do is find the highest point. This one doesn't have a motor on yet, so I can just spin it with my hand. If it's got a motor on it, you can just turn the motor on and you can put a piece of chalk on a stick if you want, or use your arm. But watch the center bar if your mixer has one of those on it. So I'm just going to hold that there. I'm going to just find the high point. So I'm going to find the high point in the bottom of the tub, bring it around directly under this bar. And then I'm going to do my initial fitting here. So this bar is going to fit in like that into the mixer. And what I want to do is grab these two bars and then slip that one under. There's really only one way that this assembly fits in. Slip it under that bar and then turn it that way, and it'll just slip right in nicely. So again, with my high point right under here, just want to fit the bars in first, see how they fit, see where I'm going to may have to grind a little bit. I'm going to see where it's going to be fitting over here and up here. And this bar, depending on your frame, all these frames are a little bit different, so it's either going to be welded on somewhere along that outside band or against this tube frame. Just kind of depends on where it is, because we want to get it in there good and tight and a little bit of tension on it so it stays put. Now this isn't going to slip over that way and down in here quite enough, so I'm going to have to grind that just a little bit. So I'm just going to take a magic marker and mark the two sides where I want to grind a little bit. And then I'm just going to mark where I'll weld it onto the frame. And in this case, I'm going to grind the paint off. If your paint's already gone, because that's where your other bars were attached, no worries. But so I'm just going to do a little bit of grinding on that side and this side, and that should allow this end to slip down nice and tight down into that corner. And it's going to come out then just exactly the opposite way it went in. All right, so I did a little bit of grinding on this point and then on these points where the paint was. But you can see I just ground those two edges a little bit. You can see I just ground those two edges a little bit, just so they'd fit into that corner. So I'm going to put it back in, fit it again. There we go. So it fits right into that corner nicely. And you might want to grind a little bit, fit it, and grind a little bit more. Just, you don't want to go past the point where it's just going to fit in there sloppy. Okay, so I've got my high point right underneath the bar now, and I'm just going to take some wood shims, and I want to have enough clearance so it's not going to rub on the bottom and rub on the side between the mixer bar and the concrete tub, but not so much clearance that you have a whole lot of clay in there left to scrape out at the end. So I usually try and be 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch at the closest point. So I'm going to take the shim and just slip it underneath right at the corner there, which is the low spot on that L-shaped piece. And then just going to get one in against the side of the tub down at the bottom, just to maintain that clearance there also. And then, so once I kind of have that in place, I'm pretty satisfied that this is in the right place. I pretty much try and line them up with that center post. This one's a little bit past, but don't worry about that too much. It's going to mix the clay as long as it's not way one way or the other too far. Okay, and then I'm going to tack weld. Starting with this one, I'm going to get a tack weld on this side, and I will record this as I do it, but I'm going to get a tack weld on this side. Then I'm going to come over to this side, pull that over tight against the edge, get a tack weld on there, and then I'll come back to this one and pry this bar out. Right now it's touching the concrete at the top, so I'll pry it out and get some tension on the whole thing, and then tack weld it in place. And then at that point I'll pull the shims out and spin the tub, make sure it's not rubbing anywhere, and then go ahead and weld a little bit, go back, clean up the weld to get the slag off, go back and weld again. So I'll do that a number of times, clean up the slag and go back and weld some more, just to get a good solid weld on each of those where they join the frame. So it's a mild steel frame, and it's a 304 stainless steel bar, solid bar, that the mixer bars are made out of. So in order, in case you need to replace the bars sometime in the future, we use a mild steel welding rod, which makes it easier to cut with a cutting torch. So rather than a stainless steel welding rod, which means then you probably have to cut into the frame more if you ever have to replace these again, we just use a mild steel rod. So, all right. So I've got my first tack weld on there now. Just going to go back, check, make sure everything's still in place more or less where I want it. And I just do a little tack in case things are wrong when I try and spin it or rubs or whatever. I can just hit that with a grinder, pull it out, and then start over again. So the next thing I'm going to do is just take this bar, and I'm putting some pressure on until it comes in contact with either that band on the outside or this bar on the center. Just kind of, I want a little bit of tension on that, but I want it to fit where it's comfortable. So there's a range of places where it's going to fit along there. I'm going to go ahead and tack weld that. All right, so that's tack welded now, and I'm taking care to burn pretty deeply into the mild steel frame and then also into the stainless steel, because you want it burned in there fairly well. So the next thing I'm going to do is get my little pry bar, and I'm just going to put it in there and just pry that over. I just hold it when I tack weld it. You could pry it over and put a shim in there if you want to do that, but I just pry it over into place and pop my helmet down and just tack weld that on. So I keep holding it while it cools down, and once it's cool, go ahead and let go of that. And next step is just to get your tub and go backwards a little bit. Wiggle your shims out of there. And I'm going to go ahead and clean I got just some little grinding stuff in there. Could just vacuum that out. Mainly at this point I just want to get the larger stuff out, just so it doesn't rub on the bar. And then again, because there's no motor on this, I'm just going to spin it by hand. Watch your fingers, don't get them in that bar, because that'll take some skin off. You can turn your motor on and let it turn too, and I'm just watching. I'm watching along that edge just to make sure I'm not too close. And that's looking pretty good. And then fits in there fairly well. So you just want to make sure your spacing's good. When it is turning, keep your fingers away from the bars for sure, because it'll nick the end of your finger, which you definitely don't want. Okay, so now I'm just going to knock the slag off those tack welds and go back and weld a little bit on each one, knock the slag off that, go back and weld a little bit on each one again. And then once we're done, we'll clean that up, sand it good, and since your mild steel's exposed and you've got mild steel in your weld, we'll want to go ahead and clean that up, get a good primer on that, and a good top coat paint of whatever color. The blue that's used on this is it's called Ford Blue. It's the light blue. There's a darker blue, which is called Exo Rust, which is true value paint. The Ford Blue can come from an auto parts store, or the older mixers were all black, so stained gloss black, good quality black spray paint. It would be good to get that weld covered up with that. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and do some welding here. Got these all welded the first time now. I'm going to come back with a grinder and a chipping hammer, just clean the slag off. If you've got a MIG welder, use it, then you don't have to deal with that. But I still would make a number of passes just to make sure it's good and solid on that connection to the frame. Because there's a lot of pressure when that clay gets stiff and it's coming around against this thing. So I'll just clean that up. One other thing, the height of this bar and the frame may vary a little bit. If that sticks up here too far, you don't want it bumping against your lid, so you might have to just chop that off before when you're doing the fitting the first time. You might have to mark that and just chop that off. So you can I use an abrasive chop saw to do that. It works quite well. It takes a little while to go through the stainless steel, but it cuts it, and which is something you can rent at a rental place, tool rental place. Also a little stick welder you can rent at a rental place also. Plug it in where your kiln is, or even possibly your stove for 220. So I'll go ahead and clean that up, and then I'm going to weld another pass, and then we'll clean it up again and probably do a third pass yet. So, okay. Okay, so I did 3 passes. I probably used, 5, maybe 6 welding rods to get this on here. Even welded underneath there a little bit, but mostly on top. And again, using a mild steel rod. So at this point, I'm going to finish sanding everything up. A little bit of hand sandpaper and put some primer on it and a top coat that matches this color, but find something that's close to the mixer frame that you have for the top coat. But a good primer, bare metal primer, and a decent top coat on it. So again, the things to do: mark the high point on the bottom of your tub, get your mixer bars in there, figure out what needs to be ground or cut, a little bit here or a little bit there. Then go ahead and get your mixer bars in, get some shims under it, tack weld everything, spin your tub, make sure nothing's rubbing, and then just go ahead and weld, clean it up, and weld it, clean it up, and weld it. So it's good and solid in there. And, go ahead and give me a call if you have any questions, but that's more or less the process.